Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
We got another bonus episode of Blue-Lusional where we are interviewing a big fish this week. He came to talk to little old us. We got Ken Russell. Here, you could tell the people what you're running for.
My name's Ken Russell, and I'm running for mayor of the city of Miami.
We love to see it. We love to see it.
Going for it.
See it.
Yes, and we know that you are not new to politics. We know you've been around, you took a little break, and then you came back. So we want to know what inspired you to come back into politics and come back into running for mayor.
I wish it was inspired, because that's what you'd want people to feel, but you kind of just get sucked back into it. Like you can't sit on the sidelines anymore. And I'd really escaped. I'd really gotten out of politics. I felt I had done my civic duty. I served 2 terms as a city of Miami commissioner. Very happy with the legislation I was able to get passed and the things I was able to change locally. I dabbled a little in a federal race and lost, and that experience humbled me enough to, I said, you know what, I'm satisfied, and I went back to my private life. But I just kept watching the shenanigans at the city of Miami. It's one of the most corrupt governments, and I will put our corruption up against anybody. People go, "Oh, my government's so corrupt." You haven't been to Miami. And I really feel, I mean, you serve on the City of Miami Commission, you are ready to take on like Colombian mafia or something. You're ready to go. You're ready to, it is such a training ground for bad politics. And I've watched it get worse and worse over this last year. And I contemplated some lawsuits against the city. I've testified 3 times against sitting commissioners, and the city itself, the city attorney, which has resulted in one commissioner going to jail, another commissioner being found liable for tens of millions of dollars in First Amendment violations and abuse of power. And the city has spent over 30 million in legal fees and settlements in the last 2 years of taxpayer money. I mean, Miami is not that big. This is not good. And I watched them give themselves lifetime pensions for this part-time job. I watched them defund the public benefits from things when I was in. They wanted to kill the recycling program. They wanted to kill my tree protection ordinance. And finally, I just said, I can't afford to file lawsuits against the city. And what standing do I have? I'm just going to run for office because that's where I know I can make the affect the change. And so, yeah, it sucked me back in, kicking and screaming.
Kicking and
Yep.
screaming.
Do you think there is like a root cause as to why there's like so much corruption, or is it like, are they just being like grown there? Are they sprouting up out of the ground? Like, if it's just so like often and prevalent.
That's a great question. I mean, we have a perfect storm here in South Florida is a breeding ground for that. Local politics is pretty attractive to corruption. It's insidious. Even people who get involved with good intentions, you just start getting gnawed away with gray area decisions. And at the state and federal level, when you run for office, you're usually voting on things that you care about from a philosophical perspective, where you stand on the spectrum of positions within your political party, and the things that we believe in for our community. In local politics, you're voting on somebody's property. You're usually voting on entitlements for real estate, all the zoning laws of your city. And so the donors, the greatest donors that come into local politics are the ones who need that sort of access and assistance, which is the real estate community. And when that gavel falls, you can quintuple the value of a piece of property. So in Miami, which is a really real estate driven market, the play here is not just to buy and build. You buy, you re-entitle, and then you build. And so that's one factor. Now, if I can overlay that with something, and I have to be very delicate about the way I say this, we have here in Miami a very rough and tumble third world politic. It's got all the elements you would see in South America or the Caribbean, in terms of the rhetoric used to attack each other, the tricks, the illegal activity and absentee ballot fraud. It's commonplace. half the people I served with had mugshots when I was in office because it's so attracted to the wrong kind of people. It's a low bar of entry for a high bar of power. And so people like me who would have never wanted to be in politics or thought about it don't usually run. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm saying more people like me, meaning just people who are from the community but don't have an agenda within either real estate or politics, should get involved. But normally they get sucked in by something they care about, something they got upset about, and then realize they could make a change. So that overlay of rough and tumble third world politic is so prevalent here because, and this is the delicate part, from 1960 to 1980, the influx of the Cuban American population in Miami has really taken this city for good and bad in probably a greater way than any city in the entire country. Nowhere has an immigrant community come in and affected a city so much in terms of art, culture, music, and even politics. The city of Miami is gerrymandered to always have a majority conservative Cuban representation. And that is not a bad thing, but the rhetoric that was brought over from Cuba, the techniques that were used, that could have been left behind. And a lot of what people ran from, the regime and the techniques that they used, are being deployed here with great success. I guarantee you there will be a picture of me with a beret and a star and a whole, like, with they'll just a whole a leftist smear campaign will be used, and that kind of thing. So those sorts of things really breed for bad politics and policy. And the last thing is low voter turnout and low accountability. So these guys, they get the mugshots and they still get reelected. So a very low voter turnout, and that's going to come into some of the other things I know we want to talk about tonight with regard to even your elections and stuff like that. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question.
No, that was perfect. Yeah, you hit all three of those on the head.
That was
Yeah,
absolutely
perfectly.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were about to say something. But okay, so kind of segueing into the next question. So I guess me included, everybody is sort of like having their eyes opened, like the veil has been lifted to politics. Like people were aware of politics, but now that we're so locked into it because there's literally shenanigans like every 35 minutes, we're paying attention to everything. So like, okay, the bill is going through the Senate and we're learning what the heck a Senate parliamentarian is, and people are learning like literally basic civics as we go along, even as democracy is falling apart. But so I guess we'll like go basic here for people who don't know, like what does a mayor have the power to do? Because I feel like people like don't know what it is a mayor would exactly be able to do.
Yes, and I love what you're saying about people learning civics through the hard way, right? Because of what we're going through. If there's any silver lining to what we're coming out of, everyone's going to be an expert on civics coming out, is because you know how fragile your democracy is. At the local level, you learn about ordinances and resolutions and public hearing items, agendas, and your charter versus the Constitution. It's a microcosm of the federal and state government, right? You have the ordinance, which is like our code that the commissioners, who are our legislators, vote on. You have your executive branch, which is the mayor, which in the federal, you've got your governor and you've got your president. There's a lot of similarities to that. And there's things that your commissioners are meant to do. They are the legislators. They write the laws of the city. A mayor, however, is different from city to city to city based on your charter. Every charter, which is the city's constitution, tends to be written differently. And that charter can usually only be changed by the voters. That's the hands-off stuff from the commissioners. That enshrines how your elections are held, what your commissioners get paid, how many commissioners there are, what the powers of the mayor are. And to your question, you usually have what's called a weak mayor or a strong mayor system, or a hybrid therein. And you will see if you tune into any city commission or council meeting, and a council is the same thing as a commission, You'll see either the mayor sitting on the dais or not sitting on the dais. You'll see a mayor that has a vote or doesn't have a vote. You'll see a mayor that actually administrates the city, meaning they are the manager, the CEO, directing the departments. Or you'll see a mayor that's more of a ceremonial, political, a visionary style leader, that kind of thing. In the city of Miami, we have a hybrid weak mayor system. And that's something it's a double-edged sword. The mayor traditionally has used it as an excuse to not do anything, because he's not the manager. He gets to appoint a manager, which is very powerful. You get to choose the person who administrates the entire city. You get to present the budget. You can veto legislation, but you cannot vote on legislation. And the most important thing in the city of Miami, which may or may not apply to other cities, but it's very key to me in my campaign. In our charter, the mayor is the presiding officer of the commission, meaning they're meant to hold the gavel and lead that commission, run the meetings, run the agendas, keep decorum, set the vision for the city, and keep the commissioners in line. No mayor in the history of the city of Miami has ever held that gavel. They always abdicate it to a commissioner. And to me, it's out of laziness because they don't have a vote. So why are they going to sit in these 8-hour commission meetings? But what they say is that their soft power as a mayor is to give a commissioner that gavel, appoint them as the chairman, and then create an ally, basically, your eyes and ears on the dais, that kind of thing. But that never really turns out. Once those commissioners get that power, they run it themselves, and the mayor's sidelined completely because they don't have any accountability to the mayor. He could choose another chairman, but it rarely happens. But for the mayor to actually chair the meeting could change everything about the way the city handles itself from an ethics and decorum perspective, for sure. But a transparency and public engagement, that the chair decides who gets to speak from the public and how long they get to speak and who gets dragged out on their heels by the police. It's these are all things that the mayor should care about. And then there's a very quiet strategic soft power that I intend to deploy. The mayor doesn't have a vote on the commission here, so they are also not held to government in the sunshine restriction. And what I mean by that is they can whip votes. That is a power that the mayor has that commissioners don't have. In Florida, we have what's called government in the sunshine laws, which means no two commissioners can ever talk to each other about anything they're going to vote on outside of that publicly noticed on TV, clerk is there taking minutes meeting. They can go have lunch, but they tend not to because it looks really bad. It's not like state legislators who can get together and cut deals. For better or worse, city commissioners cannot talk to each other about legislation. They will get removed from office on the first instance. The mayor, however, because he doesn't have a vote, can go into any commissioner's office and say, hey, this is something I really care about. I'd love to see you support it. And he can actually whip support among a dais and really build factions of support for the good things that the mayor was elected to help effectuate. So not a strong mayor, but using soft power, a weak mayor can be very effective. Just my thoughts.
Influence is a strong power.
A very strong power.
So, how have the Miami constituents been affected by the administration with Medicaid cuts, immigration rights, tariffs, the Trump tax, etc.? And how could you protect them as mayor?
Yes, and I used to have misconceptions about that, about what your role is as a municipal officer versus these federal issues, and I used to try to shy away from them because our local government is nonpartisan. We're actually not allowed to advertise our party when we run, and there are no primaries. So you sit on a dais, and everyone knows what their parties are. Miami has a majority conservative commission, but it never comes up on the dais, and so we often have strange bedfellows and vote with and against each other, but not on party lines. It's mostly about power and local issues. South Florida specifically is a very rare place where even Republicans will fight for infrastructure dollars on sea level rise and storm surge, and they're not afraid to call it what it is. Even in this conservative majority, I was able to pass all of my environmental legislation, including declaring a climate crisis, setting climate emissions goals, and then putting in the state's strongest municipal legislation, measuring 1,000 towers in the city of Miami for their water and electricity consumption, and then forcing them to improve that score every few years. No city has ever done that in Florida with a conservative majority commission. So by all those things that you just mentioned, I initially tried to really, I would use the excuse and say, well, I will only discuss it if it affects my municipal constituency and I can do something about it as a municipal officer. And it took me a little while to realize every one of these issues is affecting us at a local level, and the local level is where you can actually effectuate a tangible change on a federal issue that you care about. Let me think of a few examples. I was able to pass a ban on conversion therapy in the city of Miami, and I did it using our zoning code
That is
by the
amazing. Just
by
props
the
right there. That's amazing.
by the certificate of use that you provide to businesses. This is something that we actually banned. I don't think it would pass today because the rhetoric has really turned against the LGBTQ community from the conservative side. But 7 years ago, even all of the Republican commissioners, they knew they had to stand and salute the rainbow flag. We brand up our police cars. I don't think it feels that same way anymore. But the leadership of the mayor can make that difference, on what they normalize as important issues that they want to weigh in on. I really enjoyed being a policymaker during COVID because you as a resident, I'm sure there was such a feeling of helplessness, and frustration and even loneliness. But as a policymaker, I could help craft what the rules were in the city of Miami and push back on the DeSantis and Trump positions with regard to masks and vaccines and social distancing, et cetera. So while DeSantis got to tout Florida as the open free state, it was all of these blue mayors in the major cities where the density was, where the risk was, that were actually effectuating good policy to keep our numbers actually down. So, mayors and local commissions can make a huge difference on things we care. The most recent one, 287G, with the ICE agreements on municipalities. We were watching city after city cave and fall under DeSantis and Trump and give in their municipal police force and turn them into an immigration force multiplier. It's disgusting. It's an abuse of the fiscal responsibility of the city of Miami and any city's police force budget to spread them thin when they need to be addressing local crime. But way beyond that, obviously your police should be taking care of everyone, whether they're a tourist, whether they're a resident, whether they're documented or not. They are your community and they should be able to feel safe calling 911. So our city fell to that just recently. I was the only candidate in my race that really spoke out and protested on that and went and spoke at City Hall. It's just a shame to see it.
Absolutely. It is. And you already kind of spoke about this a little bit, but I live in Florida. I'm more up towards Central Florida. So while the risk of hurricane in Central Florida isn't as impactful as those on the coast, I did want to talk about obviously the cuts to the National Weather Service and the NOAA due to DOGE and this administration, and that some really big meteorologists are saying that they are uncomfortable this hurricane season being able to accurately predict hurricanes. Is there anything that the mayor can do? And I know that you were talking about it, so I'm happy to hear what you think would be best with the cuts that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And you're talking about John Morales. He's our local weather guy.
Yes.
We love him. He does not pull punches ever. And he really got national coverage when he kind of pulled the curtain back on these NOAA cuts and how that would affect our ability to protect against hurricanes. If there's less and less certainty in the cone, of predictability on these storms, it's very hard to get people prepared. And that's what we really rely on. The question of whether someone's going to evacuate or not, whether they're going to, put up their, storm covers or not. I mean, all these things depend on that predictability, and NOAA is the arbiter of all that. We need it so badly. It's really unfortunate that it's going to take deaths, and we're seeing it in Texas right now. And even then, it may not have a wake up call because the bubbles that we live in of our own media almost shield us and shelter us from the reality of these impacts and who to blame. It's crazy. I mean, I'd love to see someone just say, microphone, like, tell us again how the Biden administration caused this flooding, and allowed this to happen.
Mhm.
You know, it's, but little by little, you're seeing it affect people personally, conservatives who were Trump voters, whether it's immigration issues or weather issues, FEMA issues. I mean, NOAA and FEMA are a package right here. And when Trump campaigns on, I want to, let the states take care of this stuff themselves and cut your taxes by reducing everything from the Department of Education and, FEMA, NOAA, like the states do not have the ability to. I mean, we have to balance our budget by law every year, municipalities and the state. We can't carry deficits. And so where does this come from? Where do emergency, rainy day funds come from? We need FEMA support, and that's how the country is meant to act. States have certain levels of independence, but there's times we all band together, and there's certain things we care about that we have each other's backs on, and that's what FEMA and NOAA are about. I have a feeling we're going to have to learn the hard way. But what a local municipality can do is so what I did when I was in office, it took me 2 years to do it, was pass a general obligation bond for $400 million. And what that did was, without raising taxes, we were able to basically get a credit card to do all the work we need to do in terms of storm surge, sea level rise. Half of it, 200 was for storm surge, sea level rise, basically the plumbing of the city, raising seawalls, fixing the storm drains, one-way tidal valves, all these different things. And then the other half was for affordable housing and different things like that. So passing a general obligation bond is a massive windfall that a local government can do, and they can even join with other cities. If they're a smaller city, they can do a regional bond, and these they can do green bonds. It's a little bit complicated, but there's ways to do it. If you have a good credit rating as a city, which if your books are in order and they have been for years, you should be able to do this. I was able to do it without raising taxes at all. And suddenly we had the money. And it's funny because the conservatives all voted against it when we were able to get it passed. And one of the reasons it took me 2 years, I had to wait till one conservative was on his way out of office, and so he didn't care, and he voted yes for it, and then the others didn't. But then once it passed, everybody's cutting ribbons, right? Like every major
yeah.
project that gets finished. So these are the types of things. And when you do these investments, insurance rates go down, storm-related insurance rates go down. When you raise a seawall for a neighborhood, you go from what's called a VE to an AE in terms of the floodplain maps and the risk you have to hurricane storm surge, and everybody's insurance rates goes down. These are really localized things that you can pull all these levers. I was a surfboard salesman before this. Like I had no legal education. I had no civics education, like nothing. Anybody can do this, literally.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that, guys?
And we spoke to Maria Lana Kinter because she's running for 7th District for rep. And she had said, kind of the same thing about this question is we can do things preemptively. We don't need to wait for disaster to strike. We can raise seawalls. We can look at the drainage system because we can go back the last 5 hurricanes and see that a lot of the devastation and the flooding was because the drainage systems were blocked or, we have huge palm leaves. Even just palm leaves themselves can completely block a drainage system. Or the seawalls, they were just not built to withstand, 8-foot, storm surge. So there's things we can do preemptively. And I think that's what we need to get back to is like how on a local level can we just do things ahead of time?
Yeah. Well, first you got to get good people in office who are willing to make those hard decisions, and I love what you talk about with regard to supporting grassroots candidates and things like that. And I'm not even kidding when I say anybody can do this. People don't step up because they really feel they're not qualified. You are qualified. If you know how to listen and you care, like that's it. You're done. Like you check all the boxes. You can
Everybody
surround
wanted to
yourself.
be high school, president. Why not? You wanted to be class president. Why not mayor? Right?
Not
Everybody can
even.
do it.
Even the wallflower can be the most effective legislator you've ever seen. They didn't have to be some outgoing, big speech giving person or whatever. I mean, you learn. I mean, they say, "Oh, I don't want some on the job training." It's all on the job training. Anyone who knows all the answers has been in there too long and needs to move on anyway. You know, that's what they use to scare us from running. Is that, oh, you know, we don't want on the job training, and you don't know this stuff, and you haven't been around. Thank God. And so when I got elected, they called me a kid with the keys to the Ferrari because I had no idea what I was doing. I was just upset about a contaminated park in front of my house, and this gets me like fighting with the commissioner. I'm like, "What's a commissioner?" And then suddenly I'm running for office on the issue of contaminated parks. I'm knocking on doors. I have no idea I'm about to win one of the most powerful seats in South Florida because if the city of Miami is the biggest economic center in Florida, and it's the largest city next to Jacksonville, but it's the most densely populated. District 2, the district I served, is Coconut Grove, Brickell, downtown, Edgewater. It's 80% of the revenue of the city and all of the development back then. And I had no idea I was falling into all this. And I mean, just grassroots door knocking. That's all it was. I was running against the wife of the incumbent commissioner. She had $1.6 million for a city council seat. Like, and just naive door knocking, asking a bunch of questions. People are like, "Oh, I love that you care about what I think." I'm like, "No, I really don't know. I'm asking you a question. Like, what is the name of my need?" Like,
So Parks and Rec.
I literally care. I would like to know what you.
I'm trying to learn. Can you help me, please?
That's great. I love that. Well, as you know, Alligator Alcatraz is now a whole thing. Since it's outside of city limits, how do you feel about its presence, and what impact do you think that this torture dungeon is going to have on the surrounding communities, especially the ones that are more so populated with immigrants?
Yes. Well, my kids call it Alligator Azkaban because they're of the Harry Potter generation. I call it Gator
That's a good
Gitmo.
one.
Gator Gitmo. That's mine. Trademark.
Yep.
I'm sure someone else
Yeah.
came.
Those are
up with it, too.
gold. Those are gold.
Yeah, well,
Those track.
it's bad, and yeah, I like that people are trying to steer away from the rhetoric that's been given to it because they're using it as a cheerleading marketing tool. You know, this whole Alcatraz. You got to believe it just came out of some drunken like word salad meeting that they had of like, what's the craziest thing we can do to stir up the libs? And at the time, Trump was going, "Hey, let's reopen Alcatraz." Remember that? This is just 2 months ago, literally
I
2 months
watched
ago.
it last
Hey, let's
night.
reopen Alcatraz. Everyone's like, "Yeah, no, that's a tourist attraction. We can't do that." But somebody in Florida who's trying to kiss Trump's ass, and you know, everyone's trying to one up each other on the crazy just to get on his radar and get appointed to something. And somehow James Utmeyer, our attorney general, outflanked DeSantis on this idea and got the national press for like, "Hey, I've got this, you know, wacky idea." And by calling it that and saying, "Oh, it's surrounded by pythons and alligators," I mean, like, we have Miccosukee Indians and naturalists and, you know, people just walking out there in the swamps happily. This is not like no python's gonna come up and stop a criminal from escaping. Like, what are they? This is all marketing and posturing and BS, but it has a real world implication, which has a huge negative effect on every aspect of this. I mean, forget about the social implications. The environmental implications alone on the Everglades are huge. This is a foot in the door for bad development in the Everglades, which was a sacred cow. This was a third rail that no conservative politician would ever touch. They actually were beating us on environmentalism as Republicans in the state of Florida because of their Everglades positions. And many of them. DeSantis, that's in my mind how he beat Andrew Gillum, was owning the Everglades issue. Gillum really owned the social justice issues, but he ignored environment enough that DeSantis took that lane. And through groups like the Everglades Foundation, which is meant to educate Republicans but ends up greenwashing them, these Republicans have stolen that lane. This project is now undoing every bit of DeSantis's white cape of environmentalism, and everybody's seeing it. Even conservatives that care about water quality and our aquifer and all of these things are realizing that 40% of our water from Lake Okeechobee that goes through the Everglades goes right through that section, right through Big Cypress National Preserve. And to not go through the proper environmental processes for permitting that at all is an absolute irresponsibility, which is already being proven by the floods that are going through that campus. They will have contamination of the Everglades. Things are going to happen. Now, that has woken up an entire environmental group and definitely has been the priority for the tribes, both Miccosukee and Seminole, who surround that area. This has been their issue, is water flow and Everglades restoration. So it was really delicate for me to get involved as a former city commissioner and a candidate for mayor of a city that's 40 miles to the east. My first step was just to go to the tribe. I reached out to Betty Osceola. We didn't know each other beforehand, but I said, listen, before I start taking positions on this and coming out and acting like I know what I'm talking about, can you please educate me on what the real priorities are here? And from the tribe's perspective, I learned so much that I didn't know even before as a water advocate, and that shaped my position on the alligator Alcatraz. So when the Democratic Party was trying to form its position 2 weeks ago, I spoke to the chair and the political director and said, "You guys got to talk to the tribe." And so I set up a Zoom between Betty Osceola and Nikki Fried, and they talked for about 40 minutes about how this should not become a partisan issue, that this is one of those really rare moments where we can actually steal centrists and conservatives away from an issue because they know this is wrong on so many fronts. And the party listened. This isn't just about getting a chance to punch DeSantis and Trump. This is about regaining a population of voters that we had been losing, if we look at it correctly. Um, from the other part of your question was, how does this affect Miami and its immigrant community? City of Miami is, next to Hialeah, the largest percentage in the country of immigrants. More than 60% of our residents were born in another country. That's a crazy thing to be able to say in an American country. What a melting pot you are, when more than half of your residents were not even born in the United States. And we consider that a good thing. Like the whiplash our conservative electeds are having down here on having to show fealty to Trump, but then stand up for their immigrant community. They don't know which way is up, and it's they're getting outed on this because they're lost. You can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Either you support your immigrant community or you don't. you know and so signing a 287G agreement, being in support of this detainment center and all of this concentration camp and all of the stories that are going to come out of this, they're going to have to own that. And that's it's horrible. The actual human implication of what's going to happen is horrible. So I believe that a municipal elected official has a huge responsibility to step up and be involved. And so I went out to the very first week of protest there and stood with Betty Osceola, and I said, "Where are your electeds today?" There was not one other elected out there, not one candidate, not one sitting elected. They're all still going, "Where do I want to be on this thing?" And I just said, "Follow the tribes. This is their land. If anyone's been tolerant of immigrants, it's them for the last 1,000 years." you know so it's ironic. It's ironic that thing is the birthplace of the EPA and NEPA and the national preserves that are out there are all because of the fights in the 60s that the environmentalists and the tribes had over the airport runway that they're building on now. I mean, it's almost like you couldn't write it to be so fittingly disgusting. But that's my thought. Sorry.
I like the point, the 2 points you brought up on that this is a good way to steal away the centrists and the moderates, because I feel like that's very cunning and like being able to kill two birds with one stone. Like, yes, you're trying to get your initiative done, but also like, hey, come on over here. That way we'll be able to have you to get more stuff done. And also bringing up like, where are your electeds at? Because I think that's an issue that people are bringing up daily. Where are the people that we elected? Why aren't you representing us? That literally means we want you to get out here and represent us.
Want you on the front lines with us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And We also wanted to talk to you about, it just seems like everything's happening in South Florida this month. It's just one thing after another. So we want to talk to you because the city commission voted to postpone the mayoral election by a full year. And we know that that is a decision that obviously directly affects you. And so we want to ask how you feel about it, especially with it happening right in the middle of your campaign cycle.
I really appreciate seeing what you guys were writing online because you're working really hard to educate people around the nuance of this. And these sorts of things live in the headlines, but the truth is in the fine print, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard for the general public to consume the fine print. They love the headlines, but they, and I saw a lot of your comments like, wait, guys, dig deeper. There's more to this. Even your voting is a good thing. It's actually very good for Democrats in blue cities. If you could shift your elections to the years when you have a presidential and a midterm election, you can quintuple your turnout, and that turnout will then your electeds will then reflect your community much, much more. And in a city where Kamala Harris actually beat Donald Trump, if you just count the precincts of the city of Miami alone, even though Miami-Dade tended to go red as a whole, city of Miami precincts alone stayed blue, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The expectation that next year's midterm election, and if this election falls on that even year, will be a massive blue swing. And the last remaining major city in Florida that has a Republican mayor may flip. So you would think I would be over the moon ecstatic to see an even year change in voting. Well, the truth is, I've been advocating for this for 3 years now. Ever since I left office, I've been working with civic groups, to try and get a question on the ballot to shift to even year voting, and then also expand our commission. That's another subject, but we're the largest city in the country with only 5. It's really bad. But to get even year voting alone would be a massive change to the way our city functions and who's in office and who runs for office. So I've been pushing it for so long. I've worked with the Miami Herald. Their opinion board came out and said we need even year voting and to expand the commission. And I worked with a couple of groups that were going to run a petition drive about a year ago, and they just got into so many other things it didn't happen. And finally I decided I'm going to do it myself. And I started trying to work on it and talking to lawyers. And this is before I was going to run for office. And then I realized if I'm running for office or even in office, I can push that hypercharged. Like I can, if the leader of the city is advocating for that, you can either put the question on the ballot yourself as an elected official. You don't have to wait for a petition of the public. You can just say, resolution today, city attorney, draft a question for the next general election. Shall the city move to even year voting? Shall the city expand its commission? Shall the city have lifetime term limits? These are things the commission any day of the week can put on an agenda and put it on a ballot for the public to decide. These are those big charter changes, right? Your constitutional changes that the commissioners cannot do by themselves. So I started to run for office on this platform, and coincidentally, these civics groups had just lit a fire under themselves and got the petition rolling. They actually formed the group, the website, the committee, the whole thing, and they're trying to gather signatures. They have to gather about 25,000 signatures citywide over a few months to get to even year voting and expanding the commission. The commission saw this and they didn't like it. The part they didn't like the most was expand the commission, because right now each of them has 20% of the vote of the city, right? And 20% of the power. And so if this question passes, and it's one question, it's should we go to even year voting and expand to 9 commissioners? All of them are suddenly out of a job and have to rerun for their newly redistricted local seat, which will be a much smaller seat, which will actually benefit grassroots candidates more than incumbents, because now you only have to canvass 50,000 people instead of 100,000, right? These smaller 9-person, a 9-person commission has a smaller districts than a 5-person commission. All of these things are in process. And then the commission started working on 2 initiatives. One was even year voting, and one was lifetime term limits. And this is the work of a good commissioner called Damian Pardo, actually a Democrat. And he wanted to affect the charter in a very similar way to myself. We agree on these things. We're actually good allies. We disagree on some policy issues and some items and process, but he's on the his heart is in the right place. But I've been in his position for years. I served 2 terms on that nasty body, and the deals you have to cut in order to get your legislation done makes you lose sleep at night. So he very easily could have proffered 2 resolutions to put 2 questions on the next ballot this November for shall we move to even year voting and shall we do lifetime term limits. Both of those would pass overwhelmingly. We all know it. Everybody knows it. It's been polled on. It's proven. It's shown. If we put these questions on the ballot, they will win. But he realized nobody on that body wants lifetime term limits. They all are products. One of the commissioners on there was a commissioner when I was 7 years old in the 1970s, and he's still there. And we do have we actually have term limits, by the way, but somehow he's still there.
What?
He has already been commissioner twice, mayor twice, and he's running in this race against me. Currently illegally because he hasn't declared, but he's using his PAC. We won't go there.
I read about that, yeah, because you can technically get around the term limit if you take a break in between terms.
Correct. That is the loophole that currently exists that this legislation would close, which is a good thing. But also our mayor's father wants to run for office. He's already been mayor 4 times in the city of Miami. And he and this other commissioner, Joe Carroyo, ran against each other in the 80s. And one of them beat the other one, and then he was removed for absentee ballot fraud, and the other one got in. And so it's real muddy about who served how many terms. But all of them, thank you for your service. It's time to go. We need real term limits. But he can't, Damien, the good commissioner, can't get these things passed because that commission will not put that on a ballot. So here's the transaction he proposed to them. If I pass even year voting by ordinance and give all of you an extra year in office, will you give me lifetime term limits as a ballot question? Not a guarantee, but we just put it on the ballot and let the voters decide. And that seems to be the deal that's been cut. And so he was able to pass that ordinance, which moved our election to next year, which should be done by charter amendment, because now our charter says odd years and the code says even years. They're completely in contradiction of each other. And he did it in a way that each of them got an extra year in office, an extra $100,000 salary, and a violation of at least a few of their term limits, which they're only allowed to stay 4 years at a time, and several of them will stay 5. Well, all of them will stay 5 based on this. And the current mayor who was termed out this November, who's trying to get his appointment from Trump to Saudi Arabia, has another year now and he's made 12 million in side hustles over the last 2 years from companies that needed business from City Hall. He gets to stay another year. The simple question that none of them can answer is, why didn't you just put it on the ballot like the other question? Because they're the same thing. They're both constitutional charter changes. Why did one go the correct way and the other one go this way? And the good commissioner wasn't just trying to get an extra year in office for himself. I know him personally. He doesn't care about that. But he knew in order to pass the other one and even get this one passed, these are the only way the votes could happen. All they ever had to do, all of them, was support the existing petition that's out there, but none of them want to. And they've actually muddied the waters on this. People are so confused about what's up and down that the petition's lost its steam. Like, nobody's signing this thing. Because they're like, oh, they already did it, right? They passed an ordinance, right?
Yeah.
And,
They're confused.
I'm saying the means to an end matter for me. I will benefit from even year voting. It will really help me become the mayor next year. And I should want this, but I don't want it the wrong way, because the precedent that sets for everyone who wants to do bad things and cover them in good reasons is why we have such bad policy and legislation at the federal level. They have a great story for every bad thing they do, you know? And so it's so complicated, and the conversation we just had isn't something we can have with every single person on the street.
Right.
To really, try to beat unless they care enough to listen, so my mantra has been, and I'll say it each time, I want even year voting, but I want it the right way, and this is not the right way.
Mhm.
So, suddenly people are going, oh, I agree with DeSantis because DeSantis came out this week saying, I'm going to remove those commissioners and that mayor for voting for this. I have the power to remove them from office for breaking the law. They're violating their own charters. That's a removable offense. And he's absolutely correct here. But the truth is, he doesn't care about,
Yep.
he knows that an even year voting is bad for Republican, GOP candidates in the last remaining major city. And also, our mayor, who ran for president as a Republican and went mega MAGA at that point, was actually an incredibly progressive Republican just 2 years before that. He helped me pass all of my environmental legislation and social justice legislation and police oversight legislation. He would attend Trans Day of Remembrance breakfast with me. Like, he was a good commissioner and early mayor, and then suddenly realized there's a Trump formula he needed to attend to. Well, when he was of a clearer mind, he actually endorsed Andrew Gillum for governor against Ron DeSantis, and he
Mhm.
tweeted it the week before the election. Bad bet, bad bet.
Yeah.
And DeSantis won, and poor Andrew went down a whole spiral after that. And but it never left our mayor. Like, he was in the doghouse with the governor. All of our line items got vetoed at the state level for years, our infrastructure items and different things. And then when COVID came, our mayor was really supporting the the vaccine availability, the mask mandates, the social dis. The governor and him were like this.
Mhm.
So the governor is really enjoying the ability to remove our mayor and just get in a pissing match with him. And likewise, our mayor would like to run for governor next year. So he's enjoying getting in this toe to toe with the governor.
Uh-huh.
So this is not about what we all think it's about. When we see it on its face, there's all this inside baseball and ugly politics behind almost everything.
Yep.
I'm sorry to tell you guys about how rainbows are made, but it's, there's a lot of
Well,
lightning and thunder and
Hey, it
yeah.
all matters.
thank you for breaking that down, because I swear we are fighting for our lives
We
in
are.
these comments, because
So much so.
people only see it as they're canceling elections, they want to try this for the future, they're going to
Yeah.
they're going to do the takeover, all the elections are over, and we're like, what?
Yeah.
No,
Please don't
no,
spiral.
no.
Please don't
A,
spiral.
a lot of Dems tell me I should shut my mouth because this is a good thing in the long run, and I could be spoiling it by shining a light on it. I'm like, process matters. It matters to me,
There's
you
so much
know,
nuance.
because the
There's
precedent
so
is
much nuance.
bad. I
We
mean,
have to
literally,
know how things work.
they could go around next year and reverse it. These guys could stay in for 5 more years. This could set a precedent at the federal level for the types of loopholes that are used to stay in office longer than you're supposed to, because there's a good, justification for it. And it's just, and here's another sad thing: that barter he did to get the lifetime term limits, he didn't do it correctly. When you're trading two things, you got to bring them on the same agenda, and that way you hold their feet to the fire. You're going to vote for my thing, and I'm going to vote for your thing, and you're going to get what you want. I'm going to get what I want. He passed the extra year in office last month, but the term limit question comes this month, comes next week actually, and he realized last week he didn't have the votes for it because they go, oh, we already have our cake, so we're just going to eat it now, thanks. And oh, by the way, you're not going to get your term limits either. So he's now amended that legislation to carve out the old guys that are running now. So the guy who's been mayor 4 times, this term limit legislation won't affect him. The guy who's been in there since the 1970s, this lifetime term limit won't affect him. It's a complete dilution of the spirit of what was intended, just to get the deal cut and get it done. I think he's really banking on 30 years from now when people look back and go, this guy changed the charter of Miami and we're better for it long term. But the chaos it's causing in this short term, there's a better way to do it, in my opinion. There's a much better way to do it, and it can be done. So my 2 cents, my position, people don't have to agree with me, and I don't judge people for not agreeing with me, nor calling me out for where they disagree with me. It's absolutely fine.
We appreciate having all kinds of viewpoints because that's how we learn. That's how we get together. That's how we figure out where we agree, where we disagree, where we're missing a link, because
Mm,
there's always something going on behind the scenes that we're not all privy to. Like you've said, there's a lot of nuance in between
yeah.
all the fine lines. And everybody reads the headlines and freaks out. They don't read the meat of it. So
Yeah.
we appreciate that you right now are bringing the meat of it to us and to our listeners. Thank you for that. And on that note, a little bit, we have the affordable housing crisis. Yay.
Thank
You
you.
know?
Yeah.
So, with
It's,
your background in business and community work, what's your approach to making housing more affordable without slowing down the growth? Because obviously, people are going to continue to come to Miami. The growth is going to continue in large cities.
yeah, and this is a municipal issue to be solved. In fact, when I was a commissioner, would really push away federal assistance with regard to affordable housing, because when you touch HUD money, you are stuck with HUD rules, and I don't like them. One of the biggest things that HUD requires under the Fair Housing Act is that they, in their mind, do not allow you to what they call compartmentalized poverty. Sounds great, but what it means is their affordable housing projects with any federal money cannot have local preference. And so when I have a community that's been decimated, a blighted community that's trying to hold itself together, and I'm finally able to marshal the resources to put in 200 new units in their neighborhood. According to the federal government, I cannot give any of them any preference to those units over anyone in the entire county of over 3 million people. So and I've watched it happen where in the West Coconut Grove, which is Little Bahamas of Coconut Grove, it is a really stepped on community that's been neglected and really displaced and gentrified, and now it's about to see its big development boom that will benefit nobody that lived there or left there. And a project was able to be built, but because some of the pie was federal, only one local resident got into that entire project, and the rest of them were from the far reaches of Hialeah, Homestead, and everywhere, because there is such a backlog and lottery system for these federal projects. So in a sense, I've made it harder for myself. But if I really want the housing to do what I believe it should do, and the community's asking for, because I mean, they will literally drag me for building something and promising this stuff, and then none of them get into it. Like, what was that for? Thanks a lot for nothing. Or building a project and say it's affordable, and then everything's like $2,000 a unit or something like that. Oh, because it falls under the spectrum of workforce housing at the highest percentage of median income. So you've got to really truly try to figure out what it is you're trying to solve, and don't settle for half victories. Like, really create a project using the resources you have, and it's all there at the local level. The local level has so much power to create affordable housing, and this is something that's nonpartisan, because the crisis in Florida is so great, and there is no amount of economics that will solve this. There is no supply you can plug in organically that will create enough to bring neutralize the prices in equilibrium. You can throw as much market rate housing as you want, and it will still be unaffordable because the demand is just way too high in our state. So government has to put its finger on the scale. And in my mind, and I've tried it a few different ways, but is to really jujitsu the industry into doing what you want. They don't have a social conscience. The world of development is just out to make a profit. But if you can make affordable housing profitable, and you set the carrot and stick rules in place with real teeth, you will see absolute results. And what I was able to do is take market rate developers who had never done affordable housing and didn't play in that whole game of tax credits and federal monies, and through zoning and different mechanisms like community redevelopment agencies and subsidies from local government, general bond money, we were able to create complete new projects and make developers not only whole but completely profitable, and maybe even more profitable than they were on regular projects. I love doing this so much that I actually started doing this in my own consulting business after leaving office, because developers around the state have no idea what these invisible subsidies are. And I have like 3D vision, X-ray vision for all of the overlays that exist within cities where you can stack those incentives, whether it's the Live Local Act or some zoning thing or opportunity zones. But if you stack them with the things that have the teeth that force true affordability, the power is there for local elected officials to effectuate this. I also wrote zoning legislation, and this is a way you can really make a big change. Inclusionary, so rent control is illegal in Florida, but there's a thing called inclusionary zoning, and it had never been done in Florida to a mandatory level. And I wanted to test it with my really conservative property rights commissioners, and I was able to pass the state's first ever mandatory inclusionary zoning transect in the city of Miami. And it was actually in the downtown core, but in a blighted section that was still adjacent to downtown. And so it hadn't been developed yet there. There was a lot of empty, blighted land, but the new zoning overlay that I put said you must do 15% of every building in this area as affordable housing, but you will also mandatorily get additional density and intensity to make up for that financial give, basically. And so it's not on their shoulders in a rent control type of fashion, just because we told you to. They just won't develop here if we do that kind of thing. It's a carrot and stick of like, you're going to be more profitable than you were before, but you're going to give me what I need for my community kind of thing. And since that time, 6 new towers have come up in that area. All of them have 15% of the units as affordable. There's no difference between the units. They're all the same market rate quality. There's no poor floor. There's no poor door. These were all the rules we held them to, but they're laughing all the way to the bank. So they're not, they hated it at first. They were scared to death. They said, no, my market rate tenants will never live with affordable tenants. You're going to collapse and I can't leave. These are all solvable problems. The other crisis is losing existing affordability. Like, let's say, elderly, disabled, veterans, and those under the poverty line are that have a place that they rent or that they own, and they're just hanging on by that last rung, to pay their mortgage. Utility costs are high, repairs are high, insurance is high. Anything we can do to create programs that help them through that, if they qualify, keeps them in that affordability and is way less expensive than trying to build new affordability.
Mhm.
And so that's a major thing. So that is, people don't know how solvable it is, and more so at the local level than the federal. And so that's something I really enjoyed learning, and it's our biggest crisis right now.
It is.
That it is.
It is.
That
Yeah.
it is. So you had a visitor earlier. So you being a parent, do you see anything that's like a red flag going on curriculum wise going on in the schools right now? Because it seems to be this, like the southern states just seem to be like a testing ground for like every bad thing they want to try to throw out curriculum wise.
Yes, no, at the state level, it's gotten really horrible. I can't imagine what it's like to be a teacher right now. To be muzzled and handcuffed with the things you can teach your kids. And my favorite classes when I was in middle school and high school were the teachers that loved to shock us with the things we didn't know about our own country. And it wasn't to make you embarrassed of your own country or shame of your own country, but to open your eyes to the, like, this wasn't all, puppy dogs and rainbows. We went through tough times and bad decisions to get to where we are. And we need to learn from those so we don't repeat them. And now it's this whole, like, white pride of like sweeping anything under the rug that shames us for the bad things that white people did. And to not own that. I mean, Germany's a pretty good example of having a bad history, and they literally pound that education into the next generation so they don't repeat it. And we are watching ourselves repeat it right now. The strengthening of white nationalism, the just the thought that they have such a platform now in the Oval Office and our governor's office to feel to come out of the shadows and not feel like that they should be ashamed of what they feel is sadly very empowering for them. But what's paving that way is the changes to our education system, and it's that whole MAGA movement in the school boards. I mean, they really did a run on local campaigns to get people in school boards and change these policies. And I was recently endorsed by Dr. Marvin Dunn, and I really encourage you to follow him on social media because he is fearless in showing school boards and universities how wrong they are right now and embarrassing them. Because in order to keep their funding, even good people are kowtowing to these bad policies. And so he has a learning tree tour where he goes to campuses that would not allow him a space in a building, and he goes and sits under a tree like they used to do in the old days and teach each other. And he'll teach the history of slavery in Florida. He'll teach all these things in its ugliest form, and it's shocking. But that's the type of education that you remember, and it's so important. Those are the types of things I remember my dad scared me about to make sure I really understood how important they were, that I wasn't better than anybody else, and that we all bleed the same, and that everybody has rights. And I mean, this stuff isn't ancient history. These people are still alive who went through this.
Mhm.
You know,
That's an open book test.
it's really really sad to see us slipping here, and I'm very thankful to hear my kids, being curious about this stuff and asking, and I'm, you know, I'm optimistic for the future, but I hate where we are right now with regards to the rules in schools.
Would you be able to have any oversight into that when you're like, no?
No, cities don't have any jurisdiction over school boards, and vice versa. They're a complete different taxing agency. So on your tax bill, you'll see a school board millage and you'll see a municipal millage. Whereas I say on these federal issues, we actually do weigh in a very heavy and sincere way. In the education method, we don't. But what we do teach and celebrate as a city, we can and we do. I mean, we can still, celebrate Black History Month, Pride Month as a
Yep.
city. We can still fly the flags and commemorate at City Hall and during our meetings and be, but that still doesn't change what's going on in a classroom. And unfortunately, we can't affect that.
Mm.
Wow.
When you win, how do you plan on staying engaged with the community? Like you said, if you when you win, you're going to be able to do the Pride Month, the Black History Month, all of that fun stuff to get the community engaged. Do you think you would be able to utilize TikTok, continue to use that on this scale, or would you use other social media platforms? We'd love to know.
Absolutely and easily, and I think that's the least that I could do, is continue to be loud and proud about the things I care about and educate folks. One of the things I enjoyed most, and I would love to get back into this when I get in office, because the true remedy for what you were talking about with the school board is better school board members and more people running for office that care about the things we care about. And it's hard. It's really hard to get your resources together, to learn how to canvas and campaign and figure out your win number and budget and fundraise. And these are all things that aren't intuitive. And these resources aren't easy to get a hold of. When I first got elected, I was a Democrat and I reached out to the party and I didn't know anything. I said, listen, I don't know how to run a race, but I'm a Democrat running for a local commission seat. Can you help me? And they had nothing. They had zero resources for me. So when I got in office, I went back to the party. Hold your sign up. Let me see your sign.
I
She was trying not to bother, so she wrote a sign.
I love that. That is
I
so
love it.
cute.
Sweet.
That is so cute. And
If my
very
son
much.
could read and write, he would do that.
Yeah, it's cute. What she's
Same.
going to go do now is turn off all the parental controls on their phone with it. Is what she's going to do.
Mhm.
So when I got into office, I went back to the party and went, all right, the thing that you didn't give me, I want to do for the future. And I went to the chair of the party. I said, you don't have this program. I'd like to start this program. And I called it MVP, Municipal Victory Program, like most valuable player, right? Build your bench, get Dems in local office, that kind of thing. we never had it before. Or maybe they'd had it years before, but it was long gone and dead. So she says, well, you got to prove it to the board that we need it and whatever. I said, well, how do you do that? She's like, oh, you can be a board member. I said, how do I do that? She's like, you got to raise $25,000 for the party. I'm like, okay. So I raised $25,000 for the state party. I show up to my first state party board meeting of Florida Democratic Party, and literally it's all these elderly donors in a room, no electeds. No electeds are there in the board of trustees. And I'm like, all right, okay, the donors are giving their money and then going, okay, what are you doing? And the executive director and the chair are going, here's all the programs we're running, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to organize and voter activation, voter registration, everything. I said, all right, municipal victory, let's build the bench. They say, oh yeah, we love that. We always talk about that. So they told me if I raise for it, I can have it. And so over the next 3 years, I raised about $500,000 for the party to build this municipal victory program. We got over 800 we did 800 trainings for new, people running for office, Democrats running for local office, and that's city, county, and school board. Those were the three we focused on. I did a heat map of the entire state to show, because since we're nonpartisan, you can't just look it up. Like, is this dais red or blue, or where's the majorities? But we heat mapped the whole state for every school board, city, and county body to see where we had a majority, where we had a minority, and where we were one seat away from a majority, and started to flip commissions and school boards around the state one by one by one. And I really enjoyed that. I was building this program, and then when a new chairman came in, and I started raising for him, but it kind of started to fall apart, and I started to say, listen, I can't do this on my own. I was the chairman of that program, and I had an executive director, but I'm like, listen, I'm also doing a lot of things, and I need you to make this a part of the regular budget, because I cannot raise for this every year. And when I stopped raising for it, it kind of went away. And so it still exists in name, but it's not doing the types of things it could be to that level. And I don't mean to disparage what they are doing, but I'm from a distance seeing it's different than at least the way I had intended for it to be mobilizing. So that sort of machine gets people into school board, because Republicans are doing it. They're doing it, and they're doing it well. We need to do it too, and that's where it all starts. And so, yeah, that's something I would do when I got back in. I'd rejoin the party.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you
I
so much.
love that. I love
That's
that.
good.
I feel like you have a very unique mindset when it
Why is
comes to
that?
tackling these things. Just because, like, with the heat mapping, also with the trying to, take like get the centrists and the moderates back on. Like, I feel like you're playing the game of politics like very well, and we don't hear this type of like creativity from who we already have.
You learn that in local office when you have
Yeah.
to be nonpartisan and you have to get along with the guys you don't like, and you got to
Yeah.
really play chess with them to pass legislation. You're not a cog in a wheel. You're not part of a giant team. So you have to think very nimbly about really the chess and the poker and all that stuff. It's not unique to me. It's anyone who serves in local office starts to learn that sort of mindset. It should almost be mandatory. Anyone that runs for state and federal, if you cut your teeth in local office, you will be a different type of legislator, 100%.
Okay. All right. So this is actually good for this next question, since you have such a crafty mind. Who would be your VP, if your dream VP, living or dead, if you're running for president?
Oh, for president of the United States?
Yeah.
He would be a VP? Oh my God.
Yes.
We got into the fun questions now.
I feel like you have an interesting one.
I haven't ever thought of that. I haven't ever thought of that. I would love to be a VP to Pete Buttigieg. How about that?
Oh my gosh.
I like
I-
that.
We love
I don't want to.
I like that.
Here's the first caveat. I don't want to be the president of the United States. Like, I see
Fair.
what that role is, and
Mm.
it really scares me. In terms of how I used to think, oh, the president doesn't matter. It's all about the legislators. Now I've seen how damaging a president can be. It's scary. It's much harder to be a good president, I think, and it's much easier to be a bad president. It's very easy to be a do-nothing president. But I think it's very hard to be a good, effective president and really implement massive change. I mean, Obama can go to his grave and realize that he did one big, huge thing, right? Affordable Care Act. And you know how that's your whole, I mean, that's a huge accomplishment, and be satisfied with that. But how frustrating must it have been for the other 99 things he cared about that he wanted to try to do, you know? I
Mhm.
don't really, I don't seek that sort of frustration in my life. But I would love to be a vice president, I think, because that's where you can do a lot of other things. You know, obviously being president of the Senate, and you really get involved in legislation. I think you have a lot more freedom as well, out of the spotlight a little bit. But I don't want to be the vice president. But if I had to choose, I would be the vice president. I would pick Pete to be my president. That's my answer.
We
See,
knew you
good
had
answer.
freedom. It's a great answer. We knew.
I love it.
I
I love
love
it.
it.
You give us a guy that we would
Besides,
want as president.
He
Yes.
was a
besides the
municipal
gray
elected
hair,
leader, and
He
he
Bear
was.
thinks
Pete.
like this. He
Mhm.
thinks like
Hey,
this. He's a
full
policy
circle.
wonk who figured, you know, he's not afraid of, you know, dipping his foot in the Republican pool and fighting with the folks on Fox, and
I
Mhm.
love
you
that.
know,
Amazing
and
communicator.
yeah, he is. I dig him.
Yes, of
Oh yeah.
course. And our final question: Florida's been getting hit hard, and the rhetoric around Florida is just not great right now. But I live here, you live here, and Kitty lived there for most of her life. So we want to hear from you. What are some of the reasons that you love living specifically in the Miami area, and what makes it special?
I wouldn't live anywhere else. I was born here. I left in '79, moved about 2 hours north to Stuart, Florida, and that's where a lot of my formative years were. And when my son was born, I came back, and ended up getting divorced, and so I raised my son by myself down here, and I just fell in love with Miami because I was in the water sports industry, and you're in a major metropolis, which is great for a 30-year-old divorced guy, single dad, right? You're in a big city,
Mm-hmm.
and you can, you know, start to find yourself again, but you're also 10 minutes away from manatees and parrots and peacocks, and you know, it's just the nature that's accessible to us. The Everglades are right there, 30 minutes away. I mean, I'm sure that exists elsewhere in similar ways, but I find it just magical here like that. I love it. I love the cultural mix that's here. I don't think of it as a negative in any way whatsoever. Just that politics, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
can stay elsewhere. But I love the multilingual city. I speak Portuguese and Spanish and Japanese.
I saw
Um,
that.
I've
That's
actually
amazing.
been to over 55 countries, and I wouldn't live anywhere else but Miami, Florida. I really,
Wow.
really, really like it here. I for all of its faults, I think it has so much potential. I mean, Miami hasn't even become the postcard that everyone thinks we are. Like you get here and you just realize the transit's horrible, the housing's horrible, the you know the salaries are horrible. It's like there's so many things, but Miami's still successful and great and growing, and people still want to be here. And I just can't imagine what it would be like with good governance.
Yes. Yes, of
boom,
course.
Mm.
Of
You know,
course.
so
boom.
I'm an optimist.
Yes, we
I
love
have
to
one.
hear.
I have one more question. Do you also go by the saying "I live in Miami, not Florida"?
Oh, interesting. Uh, yeah, I don't think I've ever told anyone when I'm traveling to those other places that I live in Florida. I say I live in Miami.
Our
It's
friend
very
Marla
strange.
always
It's
says
true. I
that.
never
She's like,
thought
"I
of it.
live
Yeah,
in Miami, not Florida."
yeah, yeah.
Yes, I live in Tampa. I live in
I
yeah, Orlando.
Yeah.
I live
Oh
I'll
in
yeah,
take it a
she's
step
yeah.
further. I'll take it a step further. There's Miami-Dade, there's Miami Beach,
Mhm.
there's West Miami, South Miami. Those are all bullshit Miamis. Those aren't even real Miamis. There's only one city of Miami.
Mhm.
You know,
Fake
Miami-Dade
Miami's.
County used to be called Dade County,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they who let them adopt the Miami name? It's not even theirs. They, Miami is one of 34 cities in Miami-Dade County, and suddenly we're Miami too. No, you're just Dade County. Like we're one city, and then
Mhm.
all these little wannabes of
They're gonna
Miami.
come for
So
you,
yes,
man.
I'm very protective of the Miami. Yes,
Chasing the
my
clout.
Miami. Yes.
Miami, not your Miami. Miami. We definitely thank you so much for coming on and being here and answering all of our questions. And we are so excited to see what this campaign is going to look like for you. It's already looking really good. And even with what happened and it getting pushed out a year, as we know on the back end, it's going to be great for you. And we would love to see all the great things that we know you're going to do for the city of Miami.
Thank you
We
so
know you're
much,
gonna
guys.
be
Thanks for what you
great.
do. I appreciate you
Thank
all.
you.